Welcome to lesson 3. Big title is we're still looking at sociological approaches to the family, and today we're going to go into a lot more detail into the different sociological approaches to the family. So first up, we're going to learn how to explain how the nuclear family is changing and assess whether or not this family type is still important in modern day society. And secondly, today we're going to evaluate different sociological approaches to the family. In class, we're going to spend a lot of time highlighting the differences and similarities between these approaches and discussing their value. So first of all, how is the nuclear family changing? Well, 7 out of 10 of the UK population live in a household headed by a married or cohabiting couple. However, in modern Britain, there are usually 2 working parents who are both breadwinners, and this type of family is called the neo-conventional family. It is important that you know that as a key term. The traditional segregated conjugal roles are starting to disappear. So paid work and housework-childcare is now shared by couples, and this has led to a more joint conjugal roles. So we're not really seeing so much of the father being the breadwinner and the mother staying at home being the caregiver, but rather now the conjugal roles are shared or joint between the 2 people. And finally, there has been a recent change in the nuclear family in that we are now seeing a lot more reconstituted families because of the rise in divorce and remarriage. These are 3 really big changes in the nuclear family in our modern day society. Now, with all of these changes, sociologists are still asking the same question, and they are still asking, well, even with these changes in mind, is the traditional nuclear family still the best type of family to help society function well? Now, as you can agree or expect, there are going to be lots of different opinions on this question. We've already seen the functionalist approach, and the functionalists emphasize the positive aspects of the nuclear family. However, feminists approach the family completely differently, and they emphasize the negative aspects of the nuclear family. If you think back to previous lessons, you will remember we talked a bit about how feminists see society as patriarchal, and therefore traditional gender roles as patriarchal, and therefore oppressive to women, and oppressive potentially to the children. We are now going to explore 4 different sociological approaches to the family and its role in society. As you can see, on the left-hand side there is a green column which contains the functionalist approach and the new right approach. The thumbs up and the colour green should give you a bit of a hint that these 2 approaches are very supportive of the nuclear family. They would go as far as to argue that the nuclear family is essential for society to function well. On the other hand, we've got on the right hand side the red column with the thumbs down sign, which tells us that the Marxist and feminist approaches are conflict views, and they see the nuclear family as oppressive. They are therefore rather critical of the traditional nuclear family. We're now going to go into a little bit more detail into what each of these approaches say. I would recommend that you would pause the video here and draw a table quite like this one on a piece of paper and label it so that you are ready to write down the notes as we go through each approach in detail. So, what do the functionalists think? We've already had a look at what functionalists think, so we're going to go quite quickly through the functionalist view of the family. like we saw in Lesson 2. Functionalists see the nuclear family as the best fit for society because it gets us ready to fulfill our role and functions in society. The three main functions of the family, according to functionalists, are: firstly, primary socialization; secondly, reproduction; and thirdly, providing the economic and emotional support to make us more effective members of society. We did this before, so pause if you need to, but we're going to move straight into the next approach. The next approach is the new right approach. And before I bring up the text, have a quick look at the two pictures at the bottom. These two pictures should give you quite a good idea about what the new right approach argues. And hopefully, if you're anything like me, the pictures will be a visual reminder of the approach. Clearly, the new right approach is arguing that a fatherless generation where children do not have father figures in their lives, those children are more susceptible to turning to crime. Therefore, as you can imagine, the new right approach is an incredibly traditional approach and is actually a recent reworking of the functionalist view. This view became very popular in the 1980s and 90s. And essentially, the new right believes strongly in the traditional nuclear family. They believe the mum has to have the caring role and the dad has to be the breadwinner. So the expressive and instrumental roles need to be in place. They argue that the increase in divorce, the increase in lone parent families, and the increase in births outside of marriage is damaging to society. And they would argue that children who are fatherless are seen as more prone to commit crime. So those pictures, along with the text, should help you understand that the new right approach is again extremely supportive of the traditional nuclear family as the best fit for society. Now we move on to the first of the conflict approaches, the feminist approach. Feminist sociologists come from a conflict perspective and is completely opposite to functionalist sociologists. They identify that inequality exists between men and women, and they are therefore extremely critical of the family, as they argue it contributes to this inequality. Where the functionalist sociologists identify primary socialization to be an essential function of the family, the feminist sociologists identify it to be negative, as it contributes to the inequality between males and females. So, if you look closely at the way that baby boys and baby girls are treated, you will see that often they are treated very differently. And feminists see that children from the youngest of ages are brought up to fulfill specific roles. Remember, many feminist sociologists argue that because our society is based on patriarchy, which is male power and dominance over others, that living in a nuclear family teaches and reinforces this patriarchy. As you can see, I'm flicking between different YouTube videos. Have a look, because they are fantastic videos to represent the inequality and the patriarchy that women or feminists are talking about. So in conclusion, feminists see gender socialization that takes place in the family as something that leads to and reinforces inequality. Lastly, feminists look at violence in the home and the prevalence of domestic abuse. They highlight the negative aspects of family and they say that there is a lot more domestic violence than we often know about or see. They therefore identify that the home is therefore not a safe place for every family. And finally, the Marxist approach. There's Marx with his sexy beard, looking extremely unimpressed. Marxists argue that the nuclear family maintains the capitalist system, and this is bad. Let me explain why. The capitalist system is based on inequality, where a few rich people, known as the bourgeoisie, have all the money and all the power, while the rest of society, the proletariat, have very little money and very little power. So how then does the family maintain this system of inequality? How does it keep capitalism going? Well, firstly, the nuclear family supplies future generations of workers. Secondly, by socializing children, especially the proletariat, into accepting their lower positions in society, they will be ready to fulfill their mundane, boring jobs without challenging the status quo. And the third way that the nuclear family maintains the capitalistic system is by recreating the inequalities over time. A really good example of this is that the bourgeoisie can afford to send their children into private education and thereafter pass their wealth on to the next generation. This keeps the system of inequality in place, with the bourgeoisie at the top continue to control and maintain power, while those at the bottom need to work very hard just to survive. There you have it. Make sure that you know all of these approaches in good detail. Like I've said before, if you need to rewind, pause, repeat, use this video as best as you can to make sure that you know exactly what each approach argues in terms of the function of the family.